Good morning and welcome. I'm Hollister Sturgis, the chairman of the program committee, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to these weekly meetings. So I think just the way we're going to conduct the program today, Steve Meskers, our state representative, he will introduce Governor Lamont. We're going to sit down and have a kind of interview format for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to open it up to a Q&A for about 20 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have distinct pleasure to introduce the governor of the state of Connecticut, Ned Lamont. It occurs to me that should have been the closing of my introduction, but I thought I'd start there. I've had the pleasure of serving with this governor for the 3 years that I have served through 2 terms. The governor's had the fortune of only having to have done it in 1 term, which is a 4-year term, and he's announced he's seeking re-election this year. I can't think of a better privilege and honor to serve with this dedicated public servant. In the partisan era we live in, and in the political environment we're in, to find a public servant whose major role is service to our economy, to our state, to the benefit of all of us, I think it speaks so well of who he is as a person, and I'm proud to serve with him. Recognizing the problems we faced in the state, both economic and of the health care in terms of COVID and the emergency, I can't think of a better person to have governed our state, who brought us to the point we're at today, and I would ask you for a second round of applause as we welcome him today. Thank you, Governor.
Oh, that's good. Oh, it's nice to see you, Steve. Thank you. Hey, everybody. It's a pretty good commute for me. I live about 500 yards down the street on Zacchaeus Mead, and used to worship right across the way here, and I've come to many a retired men's event over the years, seen a number of governors over the years. And first of all, let me just say something about Steve Meskers. Legislature's got a lot of guys who are over here, they got a lot of guys who are over here, and you got the suburbs, you got the cities, and everybody's got to wear a hazmat suit, let it rip, let's have a party, and I need some guys in the middle, and I need people that can bring people together, and that's Steve Meskers. I got to tell you that. Look, he fights like hell for Old Greenwich, you know that. But he also has the sensibility to reach across the aisle. He can work with folks from the cities. He can work from folks from the small towns. That's how you get things done. That's how you build a coalition. That's how you make progress. And it's sometimes sticky up there in the legislature, I got to tell you. And so I'm with Steve. I'll tell you, yeah, thank you. Look, I started up my cable TV business here. Every day I sort of had an idea what the next day would be, because I had done it before and I was prepared. I'll tell you, as governor, you have no idea what's going to be in your inbox, if you remember the inbox, one day to the next. And what you got to do is put together the very best team you possibly can, give them room to run, be prepared to listen, and be prepared to change course, and get the very best and the brightest you can to help advise. When I came over 3 years ago, plus, the state was in a fiscal mess. We were lurching from crisis to crisis. We were in a long-standing legal dispute with the hospitals. So I didn't know what to expect, but I knew things we had to do to get back on track. And, one important to me was getting our fiscal house in order. And thanks to Steve, and thanks to the legislature, we've had 3 straight years of surpluses. Thanks to our work with the legislature, we've got a $3.5 billion rainy day fund. I don't know if you know what that means, but usually, oh my God, revenues are good, let's spend a lot of money. Oh my gosh, revenues have collapsed, let's raise taxes and cut spending. We have a rainy day fund, so I think we can be steady through anything that we can anticipate going forward. I knew you have to make a deal with the hospitals. They're so key to not only the local life and jobs and what that means, but really in case something untoward happens. And thank goodness we had a really good relationship with the hospitals, because look, when I came in, he said, okay, what emergency? What do you think was going to happen? You know, I came out of the IT, you know, information, cable TV world, so I was worried about a cyber attack. Yeah, I just, that was the first thing we did. We got together in the Emergency Operations Center, got all the folks, and we did a simulation as if there was an attack on a natural gas pipeline in Massachusetts, and we did this with our neighboring states. You don't know what's going to come in the inbox, but better to be prepared. One thing we learned out of that is you better be able to work not just with the legislature, not just in the state, but you have to work regionally. And at that point, you know, when I was thinking about cyber, obviously cyber knows no borders, and I knew I'd better be able to work with Charlie Baker and Gina Raimondo, and now Kathy Hochul in New York, Phil Murphy, because we had to be able to do that together. When it came to the environment, when it came to transportation, I knew we had to be able to work together. So when that day exactly 2 years ago happened, and I was sitting having dinner right down the street here, and they said, Connecticut's had its first coronavirus infection. It's a nurse at Danbury Hospital. You better get over there. And they don't let me drive, by the way, but the guys that did drive drove like a bat out of hell to get to Danbury Hospital. And we didn't know what we were doing. There was no mass. We just knew that we thought this virus was in Wuhan, and then we thought it was in northern Italy, and now it was in Danbury, and now it's coming home. And the first two things I did was call the hospitals and say, number one priority is make sure that our hospitals don't get overwhelmed. You know, you probably saw what was going on in, you know, northern Italy and even Queens. The hospitals were overwhelmed. People were, you know, there in the stretchers and the hallways and beyond, and we weren't going to let that happen. And then you had to explain to people what you were doing and why you were doing it. I mean, Cuomo always used to say, you know, New York tough. If you don't do it my way, we're going to fine you. And that's not the way it works from my point of view during an emergency like we were going through. Every day you have to explain to people what you're doing and why you're doing, or else there's a natural inclination to say no. So we tried to lead by example. You know, our 90% of our schools were closed by the time they had to close. And that was true of our restaurants as well. They were already closing, big time. Our bars weren't closing, I got to tell you. So there I had to be a little stricter. But I wasn't a fool. I didn't close the package stores. So you have to find, you know, the right balance there. But that was for a few months. Then every day thereafter, we tried to figure out how we can open this state safely. Because kids in a Zoom room is not the same thing as learning. I had to keep our manufacturing open, which we did. I had to keep outdoor construction open, which we did. Did everything I could to support our you know, restaurants and stores on Main Street. Early on, it was takeout. Pretty soon, people were coming in. And I urge you right now to do everything you can to keep supporting. Restaurants in Greenwich are pretty packed, by the way. I've sort of noticed that. But, you know, elsewhere in the state there, the hotels are still suffering and working really hard to keep our kids in school. And that was a priority key for us. Right now, Connecticut is the most vaccinated and least infected state in the country, thanks to each and every one of you. We're a little more likely to wear the masks than they are down in Florida. And I think that has kept us safe. We had one of the highest fatalities per capita in the country after that first 3 or 4 months, right? It was bad in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Now we have one of the lowest. And sadly, Florida and some of those other states have gone streaking by us. So I think we've saved a lot of lives. But for me right now, my number one priority as your governor is get this state growing again, get this state moving again, get this economy back on track. Number one problem I've got now is less related to COVID, more related to giving people the confidence to get back to work. You know, we have got 100, this is the first time in my life that we got 100,000 jobs we can't fill. I got more jobs than I got people looking for jobs. I need more people looking for jobs. If they need training, I am going to provide free training. We go to Electric Boat. We go to Pratt & Whitney. We go to Sikorsky. We say, what are the jobs you need next year, and what are the jobs you need for the next 5 years? I will put together the training program to make sure you have nowhere else to look than Connecticut. Look, we don't have oil. We don't have silicon. We don't have sunshine in March like they do in some of the other states, but we've always had the best trained, best educated, most productive workforce in the world. And Connecticut, we got to lead with our strength, and that's what our strength is. And people are getting back to work. Our economy is growing. That means revenues are pretty strong for the state. I've always said, I've said it 100 times, we don't need more taxes, but I don't mind more taxpayers. Grow that economic pie, and that's why the state's in as strong a financial position as it's been in many a year. Last thought, Hollister, is things are getting expensive. I know the inflation, and what can we do about that? It's a worldwide phenomenon, by the way. Don't blame Connecticut or, even, Joe Biden. This is worldwide. Connecticut, New York, or America now has the fastest growing economy in the world. That's an incredible benefit, faster than China, but the backdrop is their demand is outstripping supply. So I've done everything I could in terms of reducing the property tax, cutting the car tax dramatically, ending the tax on pensions and 401ks to make it easier for folks to stay right here in the state of Connecticut. Go visit Florida, but come back to Connecticut where you can see your grandchild growing up. We've eliminated the income tax for families earning up to $60,000 a year through the Earned Income Tax Credit. I've made education, community college, make it easier for people to get that degree, to get that certificate, make sure they get that. I've told the businesses, look, somebody graduates from a Connecticut school and they take a job with you, and if you forgive their student loan, we'll pay for half of it. We'll give you a tax credit, small business. That means they have an incentive to hire from Connecticut, and Connecticut has an incentive to have their loan forgiven right here. Last thought I'll leave you with is Ukraine. Talk about inflation, talk about the hit we're going through. And we have a big Ukrainian population in this state. And I've had the opportunity to look them in the eye and say we have an obligation to do more. I don't know where your feelings are, but if asked, we're going to do something in terms of relief for folks coming across. I hope to God they have the weapons they need to defend themselves so they can stay in Ukraine. I got to think long and hard about what's going on at the gas pump. You saw yesterday President Biden said we're not going to import any Russian energy, which I think was the right thing to do. It's going to mean some pain at the pump. So, Steve, working with you and others, we're trying to figure out how we can help people out in the near term, whether that's a gas tax holiday or a rebate or ways we can just make it a little easier for the people of Connecticut to power through what's yet another complicated time. Anyway, I'd love to take your questions, but I got to tell you, I love being your governor. It's for me, I come out of the business world, I've done this, executive stuff for a long time. You wouldn't want any other job than to be governor. It's an executive position. I think you can make a difference for a state. I think we can get people believing in this state and growing this state. We were a little down on ourselves 5 years ago. I think we got some positive momentum. Optimism is contagious, and I need you talking about why Connecticut is such a great place to be. Thanks, Hollister.
Well, you've hit all the high points. I have no more questions.
Oh, well, I can repeat myself.
No, I want to focus on Connecticut, but do you have any thoughts on how the American governments responded to the Ukraine crisis? Your assessment of that?
Look, I think they're doing it right. I think they're doing it slowly. Everything in life you could do earlier if you had more of the javelins and the other weaponry there on the ground before the invasion, not just after the invasion. That maybe gave Putin pause. I don't think anything gives Putin pause at this point. Right now, the Ukrainians are amazing. They've got the firepower to try and defend themselves. Other fighters are coming in. I don't think, nor does the president, nor does anybody in Congress, that you want Americans fighting this battle, but I think you want to give the Ukrainians what they need to defend themselves.
So what will be the impact on Connecticut citizens of this war?
Well, the biggest is at the gas pump. We just talked about that. You've seen that dramatically, and that's not going to go away tomorrow. Broadly speaking, we don't buy and sell that much with the Russians, so I can boycott vodka or something if you want, but it's not impactful, let's put it that way. What I am going to be ready to do is if there are some folks who are in need and coming across from Ukraine, find them a home just like we did for about 500 Afghani refugees.
So Connecticut, as they rose to the occasion with vaccines, they got vaccines. And incidentally, you said we had a lower death rate. I did a quick calculation. The national death rate was 2.5 per thousand, Connecticut 1.6. Significant difference. And you've been commended for your leadership. And also, as you said, the Connecticut people responded. They did a really nice job.
The people of Connecticut were great. We were hit hard. They were, scared, and that's why we stood up and took care of ourselves, which allows us to have our state virtually all open right now.
So are you going to ask us to be tolerant of the increase in gas prices? Do you think we'll respond again? It's going to hit everybody.
Look, you're not serious about sanctioning Russia unless you're sanctioning oil and gas. Let's just start with that. So I think it's something the president had to do. I'm glad he did it. I referenced the fact that, we can provide some temporary relief to the people of Connecticut in terms of the gas tax or providing people a rebate. The tax is maybe 45 cents a gallon. Your gasoline has gone up $1 over the last, 6 months. But it's something we can do, and that's something we're looking at with the legislature.
Okay, well now, I think maybe one of your most significant contributions is changing the perception that this is not a great state to do business. And as you know, we for the last decade or so, we've kind of suffered a bad rap. I think NBC ranked us 46 as a state in which the business climate was healthy. You want to talk a little bit about you did mention the workforce. Connecticut, it has this great tradition, leader in manufacturing. Do you want to talk about some of the strengths of Connecticut, and then maybe we can look at some of the challenges?
Well, first of all, CNBC ranked us 46 going back 3 years ago. Now they've upped our ante quite a bit, so we got a way to go, but they upped us 15 places. We're doing everything we can to make Connecticut more business friendly. From my point of view, number one is fiscal stability. We were like this for years, and eliminate tax. Oh no, bring it. We've been steady, and we've been able to gradually reduce taxes. I think that sends a message that we're getting our fiscal house in order. Number two, I just had to speed everything up. Everything just took forever, between DEP and workforce, and I was on the business side of this thing. I mean, by the time I got an answer from the state, the ship had left the port. So we've done everything we can with technology to get businesses an immediate answer. Not always the answer they want, but it's a quicker answer. I had a guy doing affordable housing the other day, and he stood up and he said, the governor said, I may not get as much money as I used to get from the state taxpayers, but I'm going to have an answer a lot faster, and that's good enough for me. And those are two ways that I think we're making a difference. A lot of people are looking at the state. We had tens of thousands of families move into the state over the last few years, and we had more new business startups than ever before in our history.
Something like 45,000?
Yeah, most of them are really small, by the way, but yes. That's how many registered, exactly right.
Now, I think Pratt & Whitney decided to locate a new plant recently in North Carolina, and we have to, Connecticut has to compete with cheap labor costs, with right-to-work states, bar unions, that kind of thing. So what's our answer to that?
Look, if manufacturing is all about the cost of labor, there are going to be other places cheaper than Connecticut, China, Vietnam, even down south. But you're finding increasingly when it comes to manufacturing that labor is a smaller and smaller piece of it, but very high end in terms of IT and coding and advanced manufacturing and the skills you need, being able to invest in the very best equipment you can. And that's why, A, Connecticut makes the most complicated machines in the world, like helicopters and submarines and jet engines. And B, that's why manufacturing is coming back to the United States and even to Connecticut. The reason being, it takes a very high-end labor force who can work the most sophisticated equipment. That's Connecticut.
So it's and we do have a lot of aerospace, nuclear submarines, high-tech electronics. This is our strength.
That's our strength, and there are hundreds of small, high-end manufacturers as part of their supply chain all over the state.
Okay, well, another criticism of Connecticut was weakness in the infrastructure. Now, I know we've gotten, I think, $6 billion from the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And can you talk about your priorities on how you're going to spend that money? I looked at some of what's been allocated, and the breadth is just staggering. I mean, it goes into every avenue of state government. But what are your priorities in that area, infrastructure?
Yeah, we're getting about $1 billion a year for the next 5 years to go into the broadest definition of infrastructure, starting with transportation. As you know, our strategic location is one of Connecticut's greatest advantages, easy access to, say, New York, the global fiscal capital of the world, Boston with life sciences, and here's Connecticut between the two, a lifestyle that is second to none. You can live here at a third, 50% less cost. There are a lot of reasons. We got the best investment in broadband, so you don't necessarily have to go to those cities every day, but you got to be able to get around. So by the end of this 5-year investment, we're going to take a good 15, 20 minutes off your commute from, say, Stamford to Grand Central. You'll be able to go over to Moynihan as well. You'll be able to take 15 minutes off your commute from, say, New Haven to Stamford. All of a sudden, that opens up the entire state and makes it easier for people to live throughout if they can get to and from. Second thing we're doing, I mentioned the broadband, is just rebuilding a lot of our infrastructure. I got to get, for example, the electric substations out of the flood zone. Seems pretty obvious. It's a big project. What was a 100-year storm is now, say, a 20-year storm, and that means our electric grid's at a lot more risk. Those are the type of investments we're making. They're not flashy, but they are important.
Now, when you say you're going to cut the transportation time, is this by rail or by car or by both?
Certainly by rail. We have all these 100-year-old bridges. We love Connecticut. It's antique. It's got history. But we have 100-year-old bridges, and every one of those old bridges slows up a train by 3 or 4 minutes because you can't barrel over it at 75 miles an hour. The highways are a little different. I mean, everybody used to say, we need another lane. You don't need another lane. We're not putting up another lane. But we found that there are 4 or 5 choke points on, say, I-95 where people pile up at the exit to get off and, say, Norwalk. If we can fix up, 4 or 5 of those choke points, we can take 15 minutes off the drive.
How about climate change? Connecticut is a leader in trying to address it. Can you talk about the things you've done and your coordination with other states in the region?
Well, the first thing we did when it comes to climate change and energy is I made a deal with Millstone. Millstone was about to pull the plug. Millstone is our nuclear power plant. Millstone is pretty old. Millstone provides virtually all of our carbon-free power. Millstone does it at a fixed price. So, unlike Texas where the prices are going like this, we're steady. So that means we got a running head start on steady electric prices, not cheap electric prices, I hate to tell you, but steady electric prices and carbon-free power. The next thing we're doing is what comes next. And we're a tight state. We don't have room to put solar panels everywhere, but we have a lot of water all around, especially off of New London. So we're making the biggest commitment to wind power the state has ever seen. So those would be 2 ways that we get control of our own energy future again, rather than hoping to God that OPEC doesn't raise rates again.
Okay, here's a sticky one. Affordable housing, the 80-G. That statute is, there's a movement to reform the statute. And you want to comment on your position?
Yeah, no, I understand the issue. Steve has brought it up to me. Freddie has brought it up to me, the mayor. Here's what we need. I'm a big believer in doing more development downtown. I just think, no offense, Greenwich, but I'm up there in Hartford now. And Hartford did Blueback Square. It's a vibrant outside downtown area. More of the folks that live in town can afford to live, who work in town can afford to live there. Your kids can be there, grandparents can be there. But I also think that most of our towns are doing it right and give them the flexibility to do it the way they want to do it. So that's what I've been talking to Steve about. There are a couple of ideas up at the legislature. I am a big believer in transit-oriented development in and around train stations, big believer in protecting zoning on the outskirts. I don't want a lot of splurge there, and give towns the flexibility to do it right themselves.
But one of the conflicts is that, the mandate says that you have to have so much affordable housing, and developers come in and they kind of overbuild in one area, and they're not in harmony with local zoning laws or the organic quality of the neighborhood. And that seems to be a sticking point with.
Yeah. Well, remember, an awful lot of our towns already are exempt from 830G because they've gotten to that 10% number. Greenwich is maybe closing in on it. I can't remember. But if the town comes up, from my point of view, if the town comes up with a really good, say, 5 or 10 year plan, this is the way we would do it, we execute on that, that ought to give you a little more flexibility from the developers in 830G.
Okay. I want to turn it over to the audience, but first, let me ask you, what do you think your greatest, you mentioned in your opening remarks, maybe an immediate challenge is restoring confidence in the economy, and I think people are going back to the bars and the restaurants. But what do you see as, if you're reelected, maybe it's a twofold question, what do you think your real first priorities will be? How would you like to see, what would you like to accomplish? And what do you see the greatest challenges?
I think for the first time in a long time, Connecticut's got the wind to its back. We got a lot of momentum. People are taking a second look at Connecticut. People are moving into Connecticut. Businesses are coming to Connecticut, are growing here. I want to do everything I can to give them a vision of what this state looks like 5 or 10 years down the road. I was an entrepreneur. You've got to tell people this is why you want to be in Connecticut, not just today, but tomorrow. I got to tell them, if you're looking for the best trained workforce in the world, you're traveling the globe, you have no further to go to Connecticut. This is our plan in place to make it happen. I know you see a lot of traffic on I-95 to and from New York. Let me tell you what it's going to look like in 5 years. When it comes to broadband, these are the investments we're making, and I've got to tell the story why it makes Connecticut the place you want to be going forward. Those are my biggest priorities over the next few years. The biggest worry I've got, we've got a surplus now, and every time there's a surplus, everybody gets like this a little bit, and we can slash taxes and increase spending a lot and go right to the same old bad habits of the past, and I just do not want that to happen. We got a $350 million tax cut on the table right now with the legislators. It's something I know we can support this year and next year and the year thereafter, but I worry that sometimes we lurch too much in a state government, and that is something I'm going to be against.
All right, well, let's turn it over to our audience, and we'll ask our questions.
Good morning. Thank you, Governor. You mentioned the 830G, and that if a city or a town has a plan that makes sense, there's some flexibility. Am I missing something in how 830G works in terms of the requirements for allowing a developer to do something that may not be in keeping with the municipality's plans simply because they have enough subsidized housing or...
Yeah, if you get up to that 10%, or from my point of view, if you have a path to get up to that 10% affordable, that should mean you're going to develop your town, you're going to develop downtown Greenwich your way, not have your hand forced by a developer.
What is the mechanism that will work through? Maybe I'm saying that the law is less defined, or maybe it isn't.
Well, I'm going to start with this, then I'm going to hand it over to Steve, because he's done, most of the work on this. But I can tell you there's an awful lot of towns that have no 830G because they're 10%. There are a lot of towns, I can't tell you how many, that are on the path to getting to the affordable housing number they set. So they get a 4 or 5 year exemption from 830G. And that's the type of thing that I think Greenwich is working on. But do you want to add to that?
My pleasure. So 830G is, as we've discussed, 830G, as we've discussed historically, was designed to incite or encourage developers to bring forward 10% affordable housing. The problem is in Greenwich, I think most of us are aware now, those of us who are informed, is that we've had a tremendous rally in the price or the rental price. So developers now look at using 830G as a tool to build as they see fit. So the first course of work is to look as a town as to what the infrastructure will support, what the health and safety will support, whether the sewer systems and the environment will support. The second is to negotiate and to try to get to a moratorium, which requires a certain number of units to be built in a certain time frame. So as a town, we're looking to see how we can deal with 830G as it stands today. The second point will be where the prerogative sits with the legislature rather than the governor is to see what we can do in the future to modify. I know that both myself and a couple of our legislators have spoken in the Housing Committee asking for relief with some suggestions on 830G. It's not clear whether we'll get through the Housing Committee this session. As you know, we have a biennial assembly. Budgetary is in 1 year. This is the non-budgetary or non-fiscal year. So it's a shortened, abbreviated session. So we may not get the relief we want in the short term. The second piece is, I know I've been working with Fred and talking with our planning and zoning, is to come up with our counter proposal and to work with the legislature to see if we can get relief. But the process will be complicated and difficult. In a legislative session, which, I sit there more in the legislature than running the whole state, there are 151 representatives, and I believe there are 36 senators. So the affected communities might total 10 or 20 representatives and maybe 4 senators. So to get a consensus on a reform of 830G will be painful and difficult, and that may require a lot of legislative action. So the first step is going to be how can we get to a point of a moratorium, and the second question is what we can do locally in terms of helping our housing authority, potentially to build more of the affordable housing. So instead of doing a 70-30 ratio that 830G allows for, you would just be building the number of affordable units to try to get us to a moratorium. I mean, that's the basic complaint and problem with 830G, is that it allows a developer to build something on the order of twice the number of units than you would want in an area or more, and 70% are market and 30% are affordable. So it's a complicated issue. But I can tell you that we're working, and we certainly have had conversations with the governor, but without stepping on his toes, it is the legislative prerogative to get this reformed. So the onus is basically on the legislature to see what we can do there.
Hi, Governor. David Mashonsky here. Easy question, hopefully. Solar energy in Connecticut. When I go up 91 and I get on the Mass Pike, it's like every single MP piece of land along the Mass Pike has got solar panels on it. And you come to Connecticut and we don't see that. What's Connecticut do? What's Massachusetts doing that gets this tremendous amount of solar energy? And can we do the same?
I mean, we've doubled the amount of solar we got, and we have a way to go, but we're not Massachusetts in the sense that we are the densest state in the country, or one of the 5 densest states. So we do not have 40 acres, 80 acres where you can just lay out the solar panels. We got a lot of old beat-up buildings, factory buildings. We're thinking about that. And I think I told you, I think we're going to make a bigger emphasis upon wind power, because 10 miles offshore, we have some of the most consistent winds in the world. And I don't have zoning, I don't have neighbors, and I've got free power once that installation is done. Let me look into that. I can tell you we have significant tax incentives for solar. You can put that back on the grid. You can resell it. We're providing energy efficiency and other programs where we pay for some of the solar. You can get solar installed with no money out of pocket with the financing. But those onesies and twosies on a house don't make as big a difference as a solar farm.
Governor, I'm concerned about town of Greenwich and our transportation situation that's going to happen this year and next year. And I think the way state projects normally work, they take a lot of years. The highway, they're talking about tearing it up, widening it, taking down trees all along I-95 from Stamford to the Portchester line. We're also talking about the post road at the high school, taking that drain out at the same time. We only have a couple of routes east-west in this town. And God forbid, if the highway goes down for some reason, this town is going to be deadlocked. So is there any way that you can talk to the highway department and see how they can get this thing done fast and maybe switch the timing around a little bit?
Yeah, I know the highway department pretty well, actually. So I can tell you they're not going to be expanding highways. That thing was 15 years ago, and I think I spoke to that. They've got to speed up, especially given the fact that with this infrastructure money we've got coming into the country right now, it's going to be a little bit of first come, first serve in terms of how they prioritize these. So we're loading up on design engineers and architects to make sure we can put in place the request for money so we can be at the front of that line. I've talked to Freddie and Steve a lot about sometimes the rail is heavy-handed, sometimes DOT is in terms of trees and sound barriers, and we're coming up with some remedies for that as well.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to note that we have 85 people watching on Zoom, and some of them are asking questions, so I'm going to interject some of them. The first question is, how is Connecticut preparing to accept Ukrainian refugees?
Well, hey, first of all, Zoom, we've been working really hard so you can come here in person now. We got tired of Zoom.
It's the snow.
But there is a little snow out there. I appreciate that. Here's what we did. When it came to the Afghani refugees, a little edgy, all these guys coming in, they're not like us. You know who we stood next to? The vets, the folks who had served in Afghanistan. And they stood next to us and they said, these Afghanis, interpreters in many cases, stood next to us 5 years ago. We're with them today. We've taken in about 500, I believe it is, Afghani refugees. They generally go to their families, or when I say extended families, there's Afghani population in New Haven and Danbury, and there they had a lot of contributions so we could renovate some housing. They did a lot of the renovation themselves going forward. My instinct is it'll be very similar when it comes to the Ukrainians. We have thousands of Ukrainians here in the state, but nobody's asked us to take any of the Ukrainians as yet. But if asked, I think we should. But I don't know, what do you think? The silence is deafening. Okay.
We also have somebody asking about the redo of Route 95 between New York border and exit 6 and noise reduction. And they're wondering what your position is on that matter and how to speed it up.
My position is noise reduction has got to be part of the overall installation. The two go hand in hand, and we're building that into our installation and application strategies.
Mike, let me ask you about tolls. I know you were interested in getting some of that out-of-state revenue from trucks, possibly cars. Where do we stand on tolls, and tell us?
Nowhere. It was not a very popular idea, to be blunt about it.
Okay,
even though 50% was going to be paid for by out-of-staters, mainly truckers that go right through the state. But we inherited a transportation fund that was bankrupt. That's just where we were. And I thought investment in transportation was really important. So two things have happened since that. One, unfortunately, with the price of oil at $150 a barrel, we're bringing in more revenue to our transportation fund. It doesn't help forever, but it helps for now. And we did put a fee on just the biggest tractor-trailer trucks that drive through the state. So starting in a year, that will raise about $90 million. Let me tell you why that's important. Because Everybody goes, hey, you're getting all this free money from Washington and Joe Biden. Doesn't that mean we don't have to do anything? No, we have to put up 10, 20, 30%. That's our share, our copay. If we can't put up that 20%, then that money goes somewhere else. So if there's $1 billion a year coming into the state, I've got to be prepared to do $200 million a year.
I appreciate the candor. Bob?
Yes, Governor, one of your proposals is an act trying to address gun violence and juvenile crime. I note that, unlike some of your other proposals at the moment, it has no co-sponsors. Would you like to talk a little bit about the principal features, your principal concerns about gun violence and juvenile crime that have initiated this bill?
No, yeah, excellent question. I thought long COVID was sort of respiratory. We didn't know what it did to our lungs, but we have been hit hard. The amount of juvenile distress, you see that they're jamming our emergency rooms, these 16-year-olds that were alone for a period of time. You see that in sort of lots of violence in and around the hallways. New Britain High School had to close down for a couple of days because they weren't able to control it. You see that, you saw that earlier in terms of some car thefts, right? I know that was in Greenwich, that hit very hard. So these COVID-related stresses are manifesting themselves in a lot of different ways. So what I wanted to do with our crime bill was several-fold. One, I said, justice delayed is justice denied. You know, the cops and the judges were a little slow to prosecute. You know, COVID had a lot to do with that. No reason to be slow now. If somebody is caught stealing a car, they're going to be arraigned the next day. Number two, we got to do more in terms of social service support for those kids, help them get back on their feet, and for those repeat offenders, make sure they're detained and not back out there on the street. And then the final question was about guns. This is a really politically charged issue, but there are more guns on the street in Connecticut, in our town squares, than ever before in our history. And a lot of those are illegal guns. They come up from what they call I think it's the Iron Pipeline from Georgia and places like that, and they're handed out. And what used to be maybe a fist fight outside the bar now is gunshots, and people are dying. So I put in place, I'm working with New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, a task force to go after these illegal guns. We got serial numbers on these guns. And if there's a weapon with a serial number that results in a death in New Britain, and there's one in Rhode Island, and there's one in Queens, we can put them together, see where those guns came from, and go right after those big gun traffickers. So we're going to play the heavy on this. Public safety is job number one. I think I know what your question was, Robert. You got a mic, okay.
Yeah, I have a mic now. So we have a lot of unfilled jobs, but in the long term, attracting new businesses to Connecticut must be an important thing. And how do we sell Connecticut to companies that are evaluating Connecticut versus other locations in other states or other countries?
Yeah, not the way we've done it for the last 30 years. For 30 years, especially the last 10 years, oh, you're thinking about Connecticut? How much, can I pay you to come to Connecticut? It was, I thought, it was very defensive and did not play to our strengths. So what I've done is I put together Advanced CT. That's made up of all the business leaders in the state, large and small. So if there's somebody from a medical device company, there's somebody from crypto, there's somebody from advanced manufacturing thinking about Connecticut, I call them, but I'm a homer, so they kind of know what they're going to get from me. But I get a senior person from Pratt & Whitney to say, we've been here for 60 years. Let me tell you why we stay in Connecticut. That's the best thing we can do. And I got this amazing guy named David Lamont. He runs economic development. The other thing we did that they didn't used to do, remember they used to just pay you up front and hope you delivered the number of jobs, and if you didn't, you ended up in court, and it was a mess. Now, we'll incent you to come to Connecticut. We'll incent you to create those jobs, and we'll forgive your student loan after the jobs are created, or forgive that loan after the jobs are created. I think it's working. We've had, Fortune 500 company, 7 or 8 really good-sized companies. Amazon is making a big footprint here in the state. Whatever you think about Amazon, it's thousands of pretty good paying jobs right now.
Horace?
Hi, another question from the internet. Dave Nelson asks, what's the status of funding for early childhood education?
Yeah, that's great. If you want to get people back to work, we've got to expand our early childhood. That means daycare. That means, in particular, infants, the youngest, because that's where we have the biggest demand right now. And we've done a lot, and everybody says, I got to do a lot more. We added $100 million to daycare last year and in the coming year and a half as well. What that means is, A, I wanted to make it affordable so that more single parents knew that they could afford. I got moms who work in the retail that, a third of what they earn is going to daycare. Half of what they earn is just unsupportable right now. Number two, we got to pay the folks who work in daycare more because right now in daycare, let's say you're earning $15, $16 an hour, and you can go to Amazon and they'll pay you $22 an hour. So there's a whole wage lift going up. We got to make sure that daycare, childcare workers, some of the most important workers in the world, are compensated fairly. So we've added $100 million, and I'll be working with Steve in the legislature to see if there's anything else we got to do in this session.
What are your thoughts about Senate Bill 28, which is going to raise an additional 1% of capital gains tax for high wage earners?
Yeah, I'll veto it.
You're going to?
Yep.
Okay.
You might as well know where I stand in life. We didn't let them raise taxes last time. First governor in 30 years that didn't raise taxes. And why the hell would you want to raise taxes now when we're doing pretty well?
Okay. And what about the state property tax proposal?
Same answer.
Same answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Governor. Prior to the Ukrainian issue that we're involved with right now, as I remember, Connecticut was #2 in the country in electricity costs behind Hawaii. Why is it so high, and what can be done to lower it?
That's an excellent question. It's our biggest competitive disadvantage. Like I said, labor costs are less and less a piece of advanced manufacturing. One reason they're coming back to the state. Energy costs are a bigger and bigger piece of advanced manufacturing, and we have high costs. A couple of reasons. One, we are at the very end of the electric grid. New York won't let frack gas come up from New York, New Jersey into Connecticut. I love Massachusetts and Maine. They got a lot of hydropower up there, but they will not allow the transmission lines to come into Connecticut. So that's why I'm doing everything I can, what we can on our own to make sure we're masters of our own destiny. That's why nuclear, that's why wind are obviously two enormous priorities for me. And efficiency, everything I can to, we got a lot of 1950s, 60s housing that leaks like a sieve. I can cut that by more than half with just some basic insulation and things. So we brought down the demand for electricity a little bit, but we have a way to go.
What are the prospects for wind power? I mean, we've got Long Island Sound, and we go out into the Atlantic. This seems to me...
I think they're really good. We got limitless area out there. What the wind guys tell me is I don't need really great gusts 2 days a week. I need consistent wind, not so great in the summer. That's when we have solar and other things, really good in the winter. And I think right now wind is still more expensive than coal and oil. I'll be blunt about it. But we went out to bid. We did it with Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York. We did it together. So little Connecticut had some buying power. So we got the lowest cost at that time in the country.
Would Connecticut ever get into manufacturing these windmills?
Yeah, why not?
I mean, that's something we do well.
We've got a proposal out there right now. We're working with Eversource. We're working with Avangrid. We say we're the best advanced manufacturing. Right now, they're going to assemble these wind turbines in New London, maybe in Bridgeport, and then they take them out. These things are enormous. There's like 5 747s, but there's no reason we can't do more than assemble. If we're assembling here, we ought to be manufacturing here.
Okay.
So this is my question. So we're at capacity in our distribution network for electricity, and we're at capacity in our generation and importation of electricity. Where's the electricity and the distribution network going to come from to support this huge switch over to electric cars that's going to happen in the next 10 years?
Again, I think you haven't seen the end of nuclear, and that's something Connecticut can do pretty well. I think you're going to see a dramatic expansion of wind power going forward. I think you're going to see a lot more energy efficiency that brings down demand right now. And those will be priorities. But your question is really well taken. I mean, our biggest source of pollution right now is not our electric grid, it's transportation. So you want to stop paying OPEC, $150 a barrel. We're going to have 150 more charging stations up around the state within a couple of years, making it easier for you to, charge electronically.
There's so many initiatives, many of them not major, but would you comment on the workforce development that you're doing to train, invest in student training for businesses?
I'll tell you what we're doing differently than they did before.
Youth that are struggling a bit.
Yeah, but it's also people that want to step up and go from CVS to Pratt & Whitney. So a lot of people are getting these.
Explain this program for it was new to me.
So the program is as follows. We have a big community college system. It's only 80% filled, and most people don't graduate from it. You say, okay, well, that's not very successful. Most people go there for a year or so, and then they get a good job. So you can say, all right, maybe that's a better metric going forward. But what we're doing is we've got all the business folks out there. We're saying, what are the jobs you need over the next 2 years? And then help us create an 18-week certificate program for those jobs. And we've got hundreds of those programs in our community college system right now. And so that's a pipeline for jobs. You graduate with much less debt, and hopefully your company is going to forgive you when you take it.
Governor, my wife and I bought a car this last calendar year. It was in the range of about $50,000. And when we went to do our taxes, we discovered that Connecticut only has a cap limit of $42,000, if I recall the figure correctly. So we were able to take a nice deduction off our federal taxes for our hybrid, it's a hybrid car, but not in Connecticut. And I just want to bring it to your attention because I think if you're encouraging electricity, that deduction might be higher.
Let me look into that. Maybe, Steve, you know more, but we will get back to you. Steve will make sure we do that. I'll tell you just on a personal note, I don't mean to stir up passions. Number one selling all-electric car in the country, number one selling all-electric car in Connecticut, number one selling all-electric car in Greenwich is Tesla. You know you're not allowed to buy a Tesla in Connecticut? You know, the auto dealers have said they sell in a different way. So we've got a lot of work to do in terms of making all-electric possible. Filling out the subsidies, being able to buy all the electric cars right here in our state would be a difference. That's a Tesla dealer back there.
I want to ask you about voting rights, your position on election reform, early voting. What do you think of ranked choice voting, mail-in voting, and voter ID?
So last year in the middle of COVID, we said no excuses, absentee ballots. I did not need hundreds of folks our age waiting in line in the middle of COVID. And we didn't know how it was going to work. We went from 5% of people voting absentee to 35% of people. People loved it. It was easier for them to do. We had higher participation, more people with a stake in the election, all of which I think is positive. So I'm working with the legislature to see if we can make this permanent.
What about ranked choice voting?
I'm open to it. Right. Seems a little complicated to me somehow,
Not a priority.
So, but if came roaring out of the Government Affairs Committee and the legislature and they said it's something that's going to get more people to participate, I'd sign it. It's not a priority.
Hi, Governor. My question is, as we've had all of these wonderful Zoom meetings in government, it gives people an opportunity who may not have the ability to get to meetings to participate in government. What are we doing to continue that so that we can see, half of the population at a school board meeting, at a local zoning meeting, et cetera, et cetera.
Look, I loved it. I thought it was transformative. I thought it allowed more people to participate in the public process, especially folks from, this part of the state where getting to Hartford is sort of a pain. Obviously, there are debates in the legislature. We got to do everything in person. I got to see the, lights of their eyes, and I can't figure out why we can't have a hybrid there and allow people to participate.
I think we've come to the end of our hour. Governor, I want to give you a certificate of appreciation. You can hang this with your Harvard diploma and your Yale MBA.
This one counts.
This one counts.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for liking Connecticut, you guys. Appreciate everything you do for our state.